I experienced such a beautiful series of moments with my daughter tonight. I got home from the sauna. I had been having a sauna afternoon and doing a lot of meditation, contemplation at the sauna. I had imbibed a puff of Santa Maria and was really just sitting in the intensified energies bubbling forth and just being with those energies very intimately. And I came into a space of wonderful, wonderful presence. It really felt like such a respite after a rather stressful few days of quote unquote holidays, which ironically can be sometimes more stressful than normal life. Um, it just felt so good, and when I got home, my daughter ran to me and gave me a hug and told me that she loved me, and we proceeded to just share some of the most wonderful play for probably about an hour or so before her bedtime. And it was such a treasure. It was like a jewel beyond price to see her smiling face, and she's hopping on my stomach and doing different types of, kind of rolling, tumbling, climbing, running. And I just felt really, really present with her, incredibly present. And she told me she loved me several more times. And that's something she doesn't say every day. It's kind of a spontaneous thing. So yeah, it was just really special that she was saying that, and I was letting her know how much I love her, which I do often. And yeah, it almost felt like her enthusiastic play as soon as I got home was somehow directly connected to the presence that had been cultivated at the sauna. Who knows? Maybe there wasn't a correlation. Maybe she just happened to be in that type of mood, but it just felt to me like somehow she could sense what I was emanating, or that I was just really here, just actually here and really available for her. And yeah, it was wonderful. And I really cherish those moments because yeah, often I'm not able to be as fully present with her as I would like. I've had the insight recently through some deep infant self-healing that our children and our inner children, they yearn for our full feeling presence, our full availability, and to be fully felt by us, to really be fully felt by us, fully seen, fully heard, not just to be physically in the same room with them or in the vicinity, but to really be available for them, really fully feeling them, fully seeing them, fully hearing them. And that's not an easy thing to do. That's not an easy thing to do, and I don't think we should beat ourselves up when we're not able to live up to that unattainable standard of, continuous, perfect, fully heart opened, fully feeling presence and availability for our children 24/7, or for anyone in our lives. It's not a standard I think any of us need to hold ourselves to. And at the same time, that's not to say that we can't cultivate that type of presence. It doesn't have to come from an energy of I'm not enough and I suck at this, and maybe if I do this for 8,000 lifetimes, I'll finally be worthy, with my degree of loving presence, it can just come from a space of inspiration, a space of love, a space of devotion to life, love for life, seeing the sacredness of life, the sacredness of the people around us, the sacredness of the fleetingness of all our relationships, can just be inspired by the knowledge of death, the knowledge of impermanence, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, and be inspired to really feel and be with people while we have the chance to do so, And parenthood is such a never-ending ceremony, and very, very deep and often very challenging spiritual practice for me. It presents the full gamut of emotions and situations. Often it's incredibly difficult. It varies. It's like there's periods where it feels more smooth, and then there's can be periods of a few days where suddenly it just feels like everything is a meltdown and everything is a rebellion and everything is a freak out, and our daughter doesn't want to listen to anything, and she's almost like she's just designed to get under my skin in some of those moments, and seemingly generate irritation, and yeah, you know that's perfectly okay. It is what it is. In a sense, it's where my work lies, you could say. I find that perspective inspiring. Like, where we get triggered, that's where our work lies. Those are tender parts and good parts to be with, to rest with, to hold in loving presence. And at the same time, again, I'm also careful not to want to feed into this idea of kind of this never-ending project of self-improvement where we never actually get to something acceptable, and we're always feeling like we need to work more on ourselves before we can be enough. I think among the most absolutely profound wisdom in life is just the total acceptance of now exactly as it is, the total acceptance of yourself exactly as you are. And paradoxically, from that total acceptance of the already wholeness that you are, seeing that nothing's truly wrong with you, broken, nothing needs to be fixed, from that space of already wholeness and pure acceptance, that is one of the ripest soils where true transformation and sanctification and heart opening can blossom organically, and where we can be inspired to fan that flame, inspired to fan that flame. And sometimes we're just not. Sometimes we're not inspired to do that. I was just sharing with a friend yesterday that I was feeling a lot of anger. It had been a stressful few holiday days of running around to various events and stuff like that. And we tried to go out to dinner the day after Christmas, and bless my daughter's heart, she's a wild adventurer like me. But yeah, when you're trying to just enjoy a nice meal at a restaurant and she just will not sit still and is getting herself into dangerous situations and rambunctious situations and crawling behind people's chairs, and you have to chase after her, and then make tough decisions about whether to let her watch a cartoon or something so that she'll sit still and you can just kind of finish the dinner in peace. Yeah, such things can be very perturbing, and when I'm in the grips of that anger, sometimes when I'm in the grips of anger, I don't always feel like practicing or investigating or inquiring more deeply into the feelings, or you know attempting to apply some kind of spiritual lens to alleviate what's going on, or immediately try to discover a more liberating view or something. Sometimes I just get sucked into the anger and I indulge in it. It kind of takes me over. I'm pretty good at not really lashing out, but I can kind of stew in it. I can just kind of stew in it, and I often feel like I do indulge in justifying it, justifying my anger, and telling myself stories that, oh yeah, I'm justified in feeling this right now. Um, and Not necessarily taking full responsibility for it. That's something that this book is kind of challenging me on. Spectrum of Ecstasy, really cool book. Embracing the Five Wisdom Emotions of Vajrayana Buddhism by Nagakpa Chogyam with Khandro Dechin. Yeah, can recommend. But in that book, they say that when it comes to anger, we really need to, they recommend killing justification, killing all these justifications that make us feel like our anger is justified. And of course, I should be angry in this situation. And who wouldn't be angry in this situation? Killing those justifications, taking full responsibility for the anger, seeing that I don't find this to be a complete story either, but it's an interesting lens, this idea of full responsibility, seeing that it's some kind of perception of ours that is um, allowing the anger to be there, some kind of reactivity, some kind of story we're telling ourselves, and that there's a potential to basically drop all those justifications and stories and yeah, cease to um, create or fuel anger in the same way. So, anywho, I don't know. Kind of go back and forth on stuff like that, where I'm like, yes, I can see it. I see that meditative practice makes a lot of sense, and I do want to practice to um, develop greater mastery over emotions and um, transmute emotions through clarity and harness the raw energy and power of emotions toward liberating purposes and all these types of things. And then at the same time, again, I come back to like, and I don't want to be doing that from an energy of, I'm not enough, I need to make something happen here, this is not acceptable, I'm failing because I'm angry. Because I don't think that's helpful, and I don't believe that. I think anger and frustration are extremely understandable, extremely relatable. Human emotions, especially for parents with 3-year-old kids or kids at any stage, really. It's just our family members have a funny way of being able to push our buttons unlike most other people can. I'm sure many can relate to that. And yeah, it kind of goes back to that Ram Dass quote, if you think you're enlightened, go spend a week with your family. It's a funny one. And yet, even a quote like that suggests that like enlightenment is about how we react in different situations. It's kind of putting the onus on like what you do and how you react, which is a common understanding of enlightenment. But I really personally deeply resonate with, and I love teachers that repeatedly point at enlightenment as actually a description of what the now already is. This whatever intelligence is beating my heart right now and making my mouth move and making all of this infinitely pixelated artistry appear in this ever shape-shifting form that is basically dancing itself forth as this unicity, as this boundless wholeness of nowness. I love noticing that that intelligence that is here right now is what is referred to as enlightenment, and that it's already here. It's already here. I find that to be the most liberating, non-dual teachings, I would say, teachings that really point to an unconditional wholeness, an unconditional freedom, an unconditional love that has always been there. The whole point is that there's no condition or requirement that needs to be fulfilled for that to be there. When it's just a simple noticing that it's always been there, and when you notice it, you realize, oh, yeah, huh, it's always, that's how things have always been. This has always been completely free to be this, and it's always been shining itself forth exactly as it is in any given moment, and it's okay as it is. It's okay as it is. So, I love that type of pointing, and at the same time, so many so many caveats here, and at the same time, that type of teaching and that type of view can become another type of shadow, or an excuse not to practice. There can just be this telling oneself, like, this is already enlightened, this is already perfect, I don't have to do anything. And in one sense, that's true. And there's like that Zen saying that says, you are perfect as you are, and you could use a little work. I don't know if it's in that kind of Japanese accent. That was my attempt to channel some Zen master spirit there, but I like that sentiment. You're perfect as you are. This is enlightenment right now. Life is enlightenment. I don't even really like the words. I mean, part of me likes the word enlightenment. It's a beautiful word, but words like enlightenment, awakening, liberation, they have such lofty connotations, and you feel like, oh, geez, that's really somewhere else on the top of some grandiose mountain, and maybe 78,000 lifetimes from now, I will finally dissolve the last speck of solidity, and I will attain total freedom. In that sense, I don't like these terms, and I don't find them helpful sometimes, because yeah, after 14 years of quite deep engagement with these matters, after my first non-dual openings, whatever you want to call them, yeah, I've come to see that what all this stuff is pointing at is really basically just becoming more sensitive to now as it is, noticing now, this moment, more directly and sensitively, noticing more of the subtleties, and basically discovering a fuller range of modes of how this nowness can present and can be with itself, and discovering that many of those modes that we typically don't engage and that we aren't usually even aware of can be very liberating to engage with, and that as you engage more and more of these different modes and these ways of sensitively being with now, you discover that no particular mode or angle or perspective can encapsulate or encompass or structuralize or pin down what is here. You just discover there's this kind of intrinsic slipperiness, or you could say conditionlessness. There's this quality of this nowness that renders it such that it can't be pinned down within any thought structure, within any conceptualization, any concretized belief system. So you basically just learn to rest with now in a more direct way and become ever more sensitive to its subtleties. And there's no end to that sensitization. You can always unfold into further subtleties of how this nowness can present. It's just it's just becoming sensitive to life, really. And as you relinquish, fixed beliefs and fixed meanings and feeling like, no, this has to be just one way, that tends to have implications that can feel liberating and freeing in contrast to a lot of our default human view. And there can also be a discovery of qualities such as wholeness and everything going togetherness and everything being allowed, and that can feel like a certain intimacy, a certain coziness, a certain love. So it's beautiful, this investigation. I love the inquiry, the investigation into nowness. Yeah, I just find awakening and enlightenment to sound pretty lofty. And yeah, as I was saying, there can be that shadow with direct pointings that just say, this is it now, nothing to do, no one to be, this is perfection, this is wholeness. That could become an excuse not to follow the authentic inspiration to continue developing artfulness, to continue developing skillfulness, to continue just meditating for the joy of it and the curiosity of it and the inspiration of it. Continue resting in the fires of loving presence. Let those fires touch the heart, open into sanctification, just ever more fully partaking of the divine qualities of love and grace and freedom, artfulness, and luminosity, and spreading those qualities, artfully sharing those qualities and that preciousness. And so anywho, caveats and caveats. Hopefully this was an illuminating or in some way useful or valuable series of reflections for somebody. I just felt inspired to reflect on my journey of parenthood and how much I love my daughter and how much she tests me at times. And that's also perfect, that's perfect. Joan Tollefson said to me one time that she had a Zen teacher, I think Joko Beck was her name, who would say, I don't like flow states. I don't like when things are easy. Better to have like a job that pushes your buttons or a relationship that pushes your buttons, something that brings you to your edge. And that's the best place to be practicing Zen. And yeah, I find that interesting and beautiful. And actually, in this moment, it reminds me of a quote at the beginning of Joan Tollefson's book, her book, Death, the End of Self-Improvement. Death, the End of Self-Improvement. Just started reading this book. It's incredible. I love Joan's writing. And I want to read this quote. I guess it's by Zoketsu Norman Fisher. And it says, practice is not about overcoming human problems. It's not about becoming serene and transcendent. It's about embracing our lives as they really are and understanding at every point how deep and profound and gorgeous everything is, even the suffering, even the difficulty. So we forgive ourselves for our limitations, and we forgive this world for its pain. We don't say, that's not pain. It is pain. You don't say, it's not difficulty. It is difficult. But when we embrace the difficulty, we see this is exactly the difficulty we need. And this difficulty is the most beautiful and poignant thing in this world. I love that. I feel like that's a really healing and redeeming passage to read for anyone who's been engaged in a lot of spiritual or non-dual teachings that can give the impression that we're trying to become these, you know, ever-flowing, flotatious, cloud masters, just levitating above it all. That really reveals the jewel in the mud, you could say, and redeems the mud and the muck and the murk, and says, hey, look, that's all the poetry too. That's the poetry. And you know what would what would the lotus be without the mud that it blossoms out of? There's a poetic completion there. And 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 something I love about the Christian tradition is that it too really honors the pain and the suffering, and it honors the dark nights of the soul. It honors those as important purifications and periods of sanctification and initiation that can occur on the spiritual path and just the path of life in general. I mean, human life is hard. Any way you slice it, it's hard for all of us out here. And rather than making that difficulty wrong and saying, oh yeah, that was always not supposed to be there and we should just vacuum suck it out of human existence, I find it much more honest and more beautiful to bring the presence into that mud and into that murk, and really see that, you know, without the cage, there's no liberation. Without the burden, there's no redemption. Without the pain, there's no salvation from the pain. Without the weight of a cross on our shoulders, there's no unburdening of that weight. So they go together, and we often want one side of the coin without the other. But maybe we can see that there's a beauty in a painting that has dynamic contrast. If life was just a repeated scene of all of us holding hands and singing Kumbaya for all of eternity, it might get a little boring at some point. And, maybe from that vantage we can see where it would be interesting and intriguing and exciting for this presence of life to say, what would it be like to forget wholeness? What would it be like to forget love and forget freedom and forget unity and explore what would separation feel like? What would forgetfulness feel like? What would darkness and writhing around, feeling lost and forgotten, abandoned, rejected, despairing, grieving, angry, sorrowful? What might that feel like, and what could be learned from that? And how much sweeter would home be appreciated on the other side of those experiences? And how sweet would it be to discover that home was always there, even in the midst of those experiences, even if we felt that it left us or we felt we couldn't see it. So yeah, anywho, just kind of a raw diary tonight, reflecting from the heart. Just felt like pouring out some realness. Yeah, I really want to endeavor to not be one of the people who only speaks about these matters of opening to life and noticing life and discovering new forms of freedom. I don't want to be someone who only speaks about that stuff as if something just clicked for me and I'm just on the other side of all difficulty now. It's not like that in my experience. I never met a person for whom it was like that. I think that's a spiritual fantasy. I think that's a spiritual fantasy. And I would much rather, similarly, in the spirit of my friend Joan Tollefson, I would rather show the messy behind the scenes stuff too, and show that I'm human, and I have difficult emotions and difficult feelings and pain and difficult things that present themselves, and I'm no different from anybody else. I'm just another dude out here who just happens to be really curious about experience, and I developed a love for sensitively exploring the now moment, and I developed a love for many of the treasures that can be found there. And that, in many ways, has been a liberating and heart-opening journey. And yet, I'm still Jordan. I'm still a human being. I'm still, in a profound sense, same as I always was. Peter Brown once said, "The spiritual path is like a Moebius strip. You end up precisely where you started, precisely." So there's some fun paradoxes in this whole thing, and yeah, just letting y'all know, I'm right. I'm right there with you, and I'm no stranger to the mud. So I hope, yeah, I hope that message is helpful in some way for somebody. Thank you for listening, family. Much love to you. Peace and love, joy, goodness, honoring of the fullness of life, the full spectrum of poetry. May we appreciate the poetry in all of it, in the mud and the sky, in the mud and the sky. Thank you. I love you. Take care.